Sage Morningbird hung upside down from the gnarled oak, blood rushing to her head like river water over stones. The desert sun pressed against her back through torn calico. Her wrists burned against rough rope. The townspeople of Copper Creek were already walking away. Their justice was done. Dust settled where their boots had stirred the earth. The sound of their voices faded into the vastness that stretched beyond the settlement. She had maybe an hour before the blood killed her, maybe less. Through her blurred vision, a shadow moved across the scrub brush, black against the pale ground. 4 legs picking careful steps through the thorns. Whisper, her husband's horse. Ayana's horse. The stallion had vanished 6 months ago when Ayana died. Now he stood beneath the hanging tree, his dark eyes fixed on her face. She whispered in Apache, my son. The horse stepped closer. His breath was warm against her forehead. She tried to lift her bound hands to touch his muzzle, but the rope held firm. Hoofbeats approached from the direction of town. Whisper's ears flicked, but he didn't move away. A rider emerged from the heat shimmer. White man. Weathered face under a broad hat. His horse was tired, coat dark with sweat. The man pulled up short when he saw her. His eyes moved from her suspended form to Whisper, then back again. He dismounted slowly, hands visible. Easy there, he said to the stallion. Whisper pinned his ears but held his ground. The man approached with the careful movements of someone who understood horses and danger. I'm going to cut you down, he told Sage. She tried to speak, but her throat was dry as creek bed in summer. The man drew a knife. Whisper snorted but didn't interfere as the stranger sawed through the rope around her ankles. Sage dropped to the ground hard. Her legs wouldn't hold her. The man caught her shoulders, steadying her while blood rushed back. To where it belonged, the world spun. Can you ride? He asked. She nodded, though she wasn't certain. He helped her to her feet. Her wrists were still bound. He cut those ropes too, his movements efficient. Name's Zeke Cartwright, he said. She rubbed feeling back into her hands. Sage Morningbird. Whisper moved to her side. She buried her face in his neck, breathing in the familiar scent of horse and dust and something else. Something that reminded her of Ayana. They said you stole cattle from Blackwood, Zeke said. They said many things. He studied her face. There was something in his eyes that wasn't judgment. She had almost forgotten what that looked like on a white man's features. Did you? No. He nodded as if her words settled the matter. Can you make it to town? There's a doctor there. Ophelia Winters. She'll see to you. Sage looked toward Copper Creek. Smoke rose from chimneys. The same people who had watched her strung up would see her riding back. They won't want me there. They don't have to want you. You need medical attention. Whisper nudged her shoulder with his nose. The horse was saddled, she realized. The leather was Ayana's work. Intricate patterns tooled into the dark hide. Her husband had been the finest leather worker for 3 territories. She hauled herself onto Whisper's back. The familiar weight of the saddle beneath her was like coming home. Zeke mounted his own horse, a sturdy bay mare. They rode toward town in silence. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western mountains. Sage's head still pounded, but her vision was clearing. She studied Zeke from the corner of her eye. He wore the clothes of a working man, but his bearing spoke of something else. Military, maybe. The way he sat his horse. The way his eyes moved. Across the landscape, always watching. Why? She asked. He looked at her. Why what? Why cut me down? Zeke was quiet for a long moment. The horse's hooves made soft sounds in the dirt. Because hanging a woman for theft without a trial isn't justice, it's something else. They rode past the first buildings of Copper Creek. A few people stopped to stare. Sage kept her eyes straight ahead. Whisper's ears were forward, alert but not afraid. The doctor's office was a small building with a painted sign. Dr. Ophelia. Winters, physician. Zeke dismounted and tied his horse to the rail. Sage slid down from Whisper's back, her legs still unsteady. The door opened before they reached it. A woman emerged, wiping her hands on a cloth. She was perhaps 40, with graying hair pulled back severely. Her dress was practical, dark fabric that wouldn't show stains. "Mr. Cartwright," she said. Then her eyes found Sage. "Dear God, what happened?" "Frontier justice," Zeke said. "Doctor." Winter's mouth tightened. "Bring her inside." The office was clean and smelled of carbolic acid. Dr. Winters directed Sage to a chair and began examining her wrists where the rope had cut. Her touch was gentle but thorough. "How long were you?" "Suspended," she asked. "Maybe an hour." "You're fortunate, mister. Cartwright found you when he did. Much longer, and we'd be having a different conversation." Through the window, Sage could see Whisper standing beside Zeke's mar. The stallion's head was up, watching the street, as if he were standing guard. "The rope burns will heal," Dr. Winters said. "But I'm concerned about other injuries. Were you struck?" Sage touched her ribs where Deputy Grimm's boot had found its mark. "Some," Dr. Winters probed carefully. Her fingers found the tender spots. "With practiced skill. Bruised but not broken. You'll be sore for a week or more." The door opened without ceremony. Deputy Marshal Tucker Grimm filled the doorway, his bulk blocking the afternoon light. His badge caught the lamplight from inside the office. "That woman belongs in a cell," he said. Zeke stepped into view behind him. "She belongs in a doctor's care. She's a thief. Blackwood's missing 20 head of cattle. She was found on his land after dark." "Found doing what exactly?" Dr. Winters asked. Her voice was steady, but there was steel beneath the words. "Grimm's." Face darkened. "That's not your concern, Doc. When someone is brought to my office after being tortured, it becomes my concern." "Tortured?" Grimm laughed, but the sound held no humor. "That was justice, more than she deserved." Sage felt Whisper's presence before she saw him. The stallion appeared in the doorway behind Grimm, his head low and ears pinned. The deputy turned, saw the horse, and took a step back. "That animal should be put down," Grimm said. "Dangerous." "He's protecting her," Zeke observed. Something passed between the two men. Understanding maybe, or recognition. Sage watched Zeke's face change as he looked at Grimm, as if he were seeing something he didn't like, but wasn't surprised to find. "I'll be back with proper authority," Grimm said. He backed away from Whisper and disappeared into the street. Dr. Winters closed the door, firmly. "That man has no business wearing a badge. He wears Blackwood's brand instead," Sage said quietly. The words hung in the air like smoke. Dr. Winters and Zeke exchanged glances. Something unspoken passed between them. "You should know," Dr. Winters said carefully. "You're not the first Apache to be accused of theft in recent months. 3 families have been driven from their land. Similar circumstances." Sage's hands stilled in her lap. "What circumstances?" "Accusations, no proof. Quick. Justice." The room grew quiet, except for the sound of Whisper moving restlessly outside the window. Sage looked at Zeke, then at Dr. Winters. "There's something else," she said finally. "I wasn't stealing Blackwood's cattle. I was looking for something. Something that belonged to my husband." The next morning came gray and cold. Sage woke in Dr. Winters' back room, her body aching like old wood in winter rain. Through the small window she could see Whisper standing in the yard, his black coat dark against the pale sky. Zeke was already awake, sitting in a chair by the door. He'd stayed the night without being asked. His rifle rested across his knees. "Grimm came by twice," he said. Whisper didn't let him get close to the building. Dr. Winters appeared with coffee and hardtack. The steam rose from the cup in the cool air. "You can't stay here much longer. Too many people asking questions." Sage wrapped her hands around the warm ceramic. What kind of questions? The kind that end with rope. Outside, boots crunched on gravel. Multiple sets. Dr. Winters moved to the window and peered through the curtain. Her face went tight. Blackwood, she said. Sage stood slowly. Her ribs protested but held. Through the glass she could see Cornelius Blackwood dismounting from a fine sorrel gelding. 3 men flanked him, all armed. Blackwood was tall and broad, with silver hair that caught what little sun filtered through the clouds. His clothes were expensive, Eastern cut. His boots alone cost more than most families saw in a year. "Dr. Winters," he called. His voice carried the authority of money. "I need to speak with you." Dr. Winters opened the door partway. "I'm not seeing patients until this afternoon." "This isn't a medical call." Blackwood's eyes found Sage through the gap. "I'm here about the thief. Mrs. Morningbird is recovering from injuries sustained while in custody." Mrs. Morningbird. Blackwood spoke the name carefully, testing its weight. "Interesting. I don't recall any marriage licenses being filed for Apache women." The words hung in the air like smoke from a bad fire. Sage felt heat rise in her chest but kept her face still. Beside the door, Zeke's hand moved closer to his rifle. "Marriage customs differ among peoples," Dr. Winters said evenly. "Indeed they do." Blackwood stepped closer. His men spread out behind him, which brings me to my proposition. He looked directly at Sage now. "I'm a reasonable man. I understand that hunger drives people to desperate acts. Return my cattle and we'll call this matter settled." "I didn't take your cattle." "Then explain why you were found on my land after midnight." Sage glanced at Zeke. Something passed between them, a decision made without words. "I was looking for something my husband left there." Blackwood's eyebrows rose. "Your husband worked for me?" "He worked your land, before you owned it." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Blackwood's pleasant expression didn't change, but his eyes went cold. "That land was purchased legally. All proper documents filed with the territorial government. When? 6 months ago. From the previous owner. The previous owner was dead." Blackwood smiled. The expression didn't reach his eyes. "Business. Transactions often occur during times of personal loss. Estates must be settled." Dr. Winters stepped forward. "Perhaps this conversation would be better held at the territorial office, with proper legal representation. Perhaps it would." Blackwood touched the brim of his hat. "Good day, ladies. Mr. Cartwright." He mounted his horse with practiced ease. His men followed suit. They rode toward town at an unhurried pace, dust rising behind their horses. When they were gone, Zeke closed the door firmly. He knows more than he's saying. They all do. Sage moved to the window and watched Whisper. The stallion was grazing now, but his ears remained alert. Ayanna died the same night Blackwood filed those papers. Dr. Winters set down her coffee cup hard enough to rattle the saucer. "Died of what?" "Fever. That's what they told me." "Who?" "Told you?" "Grim. He came to inform me of the death. Said Ayanna had taken sick while working in town." Silence settled over the room. Outside, wind moved through the scrub grass with the sound of whispered secrets. "I examined 3 Apache men in the past year," Dr. Winters said finally. "All died of fever. All owned land that Blackwood now claims." Sage's hands stilled on the windowsill. 3. Joseph Running Bear, Samuel Crow Dog, Thomas Whitehorse. Dr. Winters spoke the names carefully, giving them weight. "All married. Men, all left widows who were subsequently driven from their homes." The room grew very quiet. Zeke stood and moved to the window beside Sage. His presence was solid, reassuring. "What did you find when you examined them?" he asked. "Symptoms consistent with fever, but also something else. Something that didn't fit the pattern." "What?" "Discoloration around the mouth. Unusual odor." signs that suggested poisoning rather than natural illness. Sage felt the world shift beneath her feet. She gripped the windowsill harder. You think they were murdered? I think someone is systematically removing Apache landowners. And making it look natural. Zeke was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. How long has this been happening? Started about 18 months ago, right after Blackwood arrived in Copper Creek. Outside, Whisper raised his head suddenly. His ears pricked forward, focused on something beyond the town. A moment later, the sound of approaching horses reached them. More company, Zeke said, but these riders were different. They came slowly, deliberately, no dust cloud marking their passage. Sage recognized the lead horse before she saw its rider. Mary, she breathed. Her sister dismounted carefully. Mary Morningbird was older by 5 years, her face marked by sun and worry. She wore traditional Apache dress, but carried herself with the wariness of someone who had learned to navigate white society. 2 other Apache riders flanked her. Men Sage recognized from her husband's band. They remained mounted, watching the street with careful eyes. Mary approached the door. Dr. Winters opened it before she could knock. Sister, Mary said in Apache. Sister, Sage replied. They embraced briefly. Mary's hands found the rope burns on Sage's wrists. Her jaw tightened, but she said nothing. We heard what happened, Mary said, switching to English for the benefit of the others. We came to bring you home. I can't leave yet. Why? Sage looked at Zeke, then back at her sister. Because Ayanna didn't die of fever. Mary's face went very still. How do you know? Dr. Winters examined other men. Same symptoms, same circumstances. Same outcome, Dr. Winters added quietly. Mary looked around the room, taking in the tension, the weapons, the careful positioning of people. Near windows and doors. You think someone is killing our men. I think someone is stealing our land, Sage said, and killing anyone who might object. The wind outside picked up, rattling the windows. Whisper moved closer to the building, his dark form visible through the glass. What do you need? Mary asked. The question was simple but carried weight. Sage looked at her sister, seeing years of shared hardship and survival reflected in familiar features. I need to know how Ayanna really died. And I need to find what he hid before they killed him. Mary nodded slowly. Then we stay. It's dangerous. Everything is dangerous now. Through the window, Sage watched Whisper graze peacefully in the yard. But his positioning wasn't random. He stood where he could see all approaches to the building. Where he could warn them of trouble. Where he could protect what remained of Ayanna's family. The horse lifted his head and looked directly at her through the glass. For a moment, she could swear she saw her husband's eyes looking back. That night they rode out together. Sage on Whisper, Zeke on his bay mare, Mary and the 2 Apache men flanking them. The moon was dark, the sky scattered with stars that gave just enough light to see the trail. They moved toward the place where Sage had been caught. The land that had once belonged to her husband's people. The land that Blackwood now claimed through papers signed in blood. Whisper knew the way without guidance. His hooves found the familiar paths through scrub and stone. The stallion's ears moved constantly, listening to sounds the humans couldn't hear. There, Sage said softly. A depression in the landscape opened before them. What had once been a small settlement. Adobe walls stood broken and empty, roofs collapsed inward. The wind moved through the ruins with the sound of mourning. They dismounted near what had been Ayanna's workshop. The leather-working tools were gone, but the smell lingered. Sage knelt and touched the packed earth floor. Her fingers found grooves worn by years of careful work. What was he hiding? Zeke asked. I don't know. But Whisper brought me here before. 3 times, always to this spot. Mary walked the perimeter of the ruined building. Her feet made no sound on the ground. The earth has been disturbed here, recently. They looked where she pointed. The soil was darker, less settled than the area around it. Someone had been digging. Blackwood's men, one of Mary's companions said. His name was Joseph. His English carried the careful precision of someone who had learned it late. They came here 2 days ago. Sage stood quickly. They found something? Maybe. They left angry. Hope flickered in her chest. If Blackwood's men had left angry, perhaps they hadn't found what they were looking for. Perhaps Ayanna had hidden his secret too well. Whisper moved past them to the far corner of the ruins. He lowered his head and began pawing at the ground. Deliberate movements, as if he were digging. He's trying to tell us something, Mary said. They followed the horse. Where his hooves had scraped the earth, something glinted in the starlight. Metal. Sage knelt and brushed away loose soil. A tin box, small enough to hold in 2 hands. The metal was dented but intact. She lifted it carefully, feeling the weight of whatever lay inside. The lid was stuck with rust and time. Zeke drew his knife and worked it around the edges. The metal gave way with a soft scraping sound. Inside were papers. Documents folded and refolded, edges worn soft. Sage lifted them out with trembling fingers. Even in the dim light, she could see official seals, territorial markings. Land grants, Mary said, reading over her shoulder. Original grants, Zeke corrected. His voice was tight. Signed by territorial governors, predating Blackwood's claims by 20 years. Sage's heart hammered against her ribs. These papers proved Apache ownership of thousands of acres. Land that Blackwood had claimed. Through forged documents and murder. Ayanna knew, she whispered. He knew what Blackwood was doing. A sound carried across the night air. Hoofbeats. Multiple horses moving fast. The group froze, listening. Riders coming, Joseph said. From town. They had been followed. Or expected. Sage clutched the papers against her chest while the others mounted quickly. Whisper stood perfectly still as she climbed onto his back. The hoofbeats grew louder. Torchlight flickered between the hills. Too many riders to fight. Too many to outrun on tired horses. This way, Mary said. She led them away from the settlement, following paths that wound through broken country. The horses picked their way carefully over loose stone and hidden arroyos. Behind them, the torches spread out, searching. They rode hard for an hour before Mary called a halt. They had reached a place where the land folded back on itself, creating natural shelter. The horses were lathered and blowing hard. We can't go back to town, Zeke said. Blackwood will have men watching every approach. We can't stay out here either, Joseph replied. No water, no supplies. Sage looked at the papers in her hands. Evidence that could bring down Blackwood's empire. Evidence that men had died to protect. Evidence that more would die for if they weren't careful. There's another way, she said quietly. Mary looked at her sharply. What way? We take the fight to him. Make him come to us. How? Sage folded the papers carefully and tucked them inside her shirt. By letting him know we have what he wants. And by making sure the whole town sees what happens next. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of smoke from the distant torches. Somewhere in the darkness, Blackwood's men were still searching. Still hunting. The harvest celebration, Dr. Winters had mentioned. It days ago. The annual gathering when all of Copper Creek came together. When truth spoken loudly enough could reach every ear. 3 days, Sage said. We have 3 days to prepare. Zeke studied her face in the starlight. Something passed between them, understanding, acceptance of what might come. You're talking about walking into a trap, he said. I'm talking about setting one. They made camp in the shelter of overhanging rock. No fire, cold food and colder. water from their canteens. The horses stood close together, conserving warmth. Mary sat beside her sister, their shoulders touching. Ayanna would be proud, she said softly. Ayanna would be alive if he'd been more careful. Maybe, or maybe some fights can't be avoided. Across the small space, Zeke cleaned his rifle. With practiced movements, his hands worked automatically while his mind was clearly elsewhere. Joseph and the other Apache man kept watch, their forms barely visible against the rocks. Whisper stood apart from the other horses. His head was up, ears forward, as if he were listening to voices only he could hear. In the starlight, his black coat looked ethereal, ghostly. "He's not just a horse," Mary said, following Sage's gaze. "What do you mean? Look at him. Really look." Sage watched Whisper move restlessly at the edge of their shelter. There was something in his behavior that went beyond normal animal instincts. An intelligence that seemed almost human. Ayanna spent months training him, Mary continued, teaching him things. Secret things. What kind of things? Commands in Apache, hand signals. How to find specific places, specific people. Mary was quiet for a moment. How to carry messages. The words settled into Sage's mind slowly. She thought about Whisper's behavior since Ayanna's death. The way he had disappeared for months, then returned at the exact moment she needed him. The way he had led her to the buried tin box. The way he seemed to understand human conversation. "The saddle," she said suddenly. Mary nodded. Ayanna worked on it for weeks before he died. Special leather. Special stitching. Said it was for Whisper's protection. Sage stood and walked to where Whisper stood guard. The stallion turned his head toward her, eyes reflecting starlight. She ran her hands over the saddle, feeling the familiar leatherwork, but now she felt it differently. Her fingers found places where the stitching created ridges, patterns that weren't decorative. Places where the leather was thicker than it should be. Hidden compartments. Her heart began to race. If Ayanna had hidden land grants in a buried tin box, what else might he have hidden? What other secrets might Whisper be carrying? She looked back at the others. Zeke was watching her, rifle forgotten in his lap. Mary's eyes held knowledge and sadness. "There's more, isn't there?" Sage asked. Mary nodded slowly. "Much more." The wind picked up, scattering dust and dried leaves. In the distance, the last of the torches flickered and went out. Blackwood's men had given up their search for the night. But tomorrow they would be back. And the day after that. Until they found what they were looking for or eliminated everyone who might possess it. 3 days until the harvest celebration. 3 days to uncover all of Ayanna's secrets. 3 days to prepare for a confrontation that would determine the fate of every Apache family in the territory. Sage pressed her face against Whisper's neck, breathing in the familiar scent of horse and leather, and something else. Something that reminded her of her husband's gentle hands and quiet voice. "Show me," she whispered to the horse. "Show me what he wanted me to find." The morning of the harvest celebration dawned clear and cold. Copper Creek had transformed overnight into something festive. Banners hung between buildings, tables groaned under the weight of food, and the smell of roasting meat filled the air. Sage sat on Whisper at the edge of town, watching people gather in the main street. Men, women, children. Families she recognized and others she didn't. All of them preparing to witness what she hoped would be justice, or her death. Zeke rode up beside her. His rifle was clean and loaded, resting across his saddle. "You sure about this?" She touched the papers hidden inside her shirt. The evidence that Ayanna had died protecting. "No. Good. People who are sure get careless." Mary and the others had positioned themselves around the celebration, close enough to help if needed. Far enough away to escape if everything went wrong. "Time," Zeke said. They rode into town slowly. Whisper's hooves struck the packed earth. With deliberate rhythm, People turned to stare. Conversations died. The festive atmosphere grew heavy with tension. Dr. Winters stood near the medical station she had set up for the celebration. Her eyes found Sage's and held them. A small nod passed between the women. Blackwood appeared from the crowd. He wore his finest clothes, a gold watch chain glinting across his vest. Behind him came Grimm and 3 other men, all armed. "Mrs. Morningbird," Blackwood called out. His voice carried across the sudden quiet. "How good of you to join us." Sage dismounted. From Whisper, the stallion moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth. "Mr. Blackwood, I believe you have something that belongs to me." The crowd pressed closer, sensing drama. Children were pulled back by their parents. Men let their hands drift toward weapons. "I have something that belonged to my husband," Sage said. Her voice was steady, carrying to every ear. "And to his father, and his father's father." She drew the papers from her shirt. The territorial seals caught the morning sun. Murmurs rippled through the gathered people. "Land grants," she continued. "Original grants. Signed 20 years before you arrived in this territory." Blackwood's pleasant expression didn't change, but his eyes went cold. "Forgeries. Desperate. Lies from a desperate woman. Are they?" Dr. Winters stepped forward. In her hands was a leather satchel. "Because I have the death certificates you filed for Joseph Running Bear, Samuel Crowdog, and Thomas Whitehorse, all claiming natural death by fever." She opened the satchel and withdrew more papers. "And I have my own examination notes, describing symptoms consistent with poisoning, not disease." The crowd stirred uneasily. Blackwood's hand moved toward his coat but stopped when Zeke's rifle shifted in his direction. "Accusations from a woman and a half-breed," Grimm said loudly. "No court would hear this." "Maybe not," Sage said. "But this court will." She gestured to the people surrounding them. Faces she recognized from the day they had strung her up. Faces that had watched her suffer and done nothing. "You all know what happened to the Apache families. You all know how Blackwood acquired their land." Her voice carried across the silent crowd. "Some of you participated. Some of you just watched. But all of you know the truth." A woman near the back called out, "Those people were thieves. You were caught stealing." "Was I?" Sage looked directly at her. "Or was I looking for evidence of murder?" Whisper moved then, as if responding to some unheard signal. The stallion walked to the center of the crowd and stopped. He lowered his head and began pawing at the ground. People stepped back, unsettled by the horse's behavior. Whisper continued his deliberate movements, as if he were trying to dig something up from beneath the packed earth. "That animal is trained," someone said. "Trained to perform tricks." "Maybe," Sage said. "But trained by whom, and for what purpose?" She approached Whisper slowly. The stallion stood perfectly still as she began working at the leather straps that held his saddle in place. Her fingers found the hidden compartments that Mary had told her about. The crowd watched in silence as she withdrew more papers from the specially designed leather. Documents, letters, a journal bound in oiled cloth. "My husband spent months gathering evidence," she said, holding up the journal. "Recording conversations, documenting bribes, tracking the pattern of deaths that coincided with land acquisitions." Blackwood stepped forward. "Enough of this charade." "You're right," Sage said. "It is enough." She opened the journal and began to read names, dates, amounts of money paid to territorial officials, details of how poison had been administered to Apache landowners during supposed social visits. The crowd grew restless. Some faces showed shame, others anger, a few showed fear. Thomas Whitehorse was poisoned at a treaty negotiation dinner. Sage read, Samuel Crowdog during a supposed peace ceremony. Joseph Running Bear while delivering leather goods to town. Dr. Winters spoke into the silence. I can confirm the symptoms described in that journal match what I observed during my examinations. And I can confirm the territorial filings. Zeke added. He had been busy during their 3 days of preparation. Every land grant claimed by Mr. Blackwood was filed within days of an Apache death. Filed using forged signatures and falsified documents. Blackwood's composure finally cracked. These are lies. Fabrications designed to steal legally acquired property. Then you won't mind territorial investigators examining your documents. Dr. Winters said calmly. I sent word to the capital 3 days ago. They should arrive this afternoon. The words hit Blackwood harder than physical blows. His face went pale, then flushed red. You interfering witch. I'm a physician. I took an oath to do no harm. That includes speaking for those who can no longer speak for themselves. The crowd was shifting now. People were looking at Blackwood differently, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. He killed them, a voice called out. An older man Sage didn't recognize. Killed them and stole their land. Where's your proof? Grimm demanded. Sage held up the journal. Here, in my husband's words. In his careful documentation of every crime, she looked around the circle of faces. Some hostile, some uncertain, some beginning to show the weight of guilt. My husband knew he was in danger. He knew that speaking out would cost him his life. But he also knew that staying silent would cost the lives of others. Whisper moved to stand beside her again. The stallion's presence was solid, reassuring, a living connection to Ayana's memory and sacrifice. So he trained his horse to carry the truth, to protect it, to bring it back when the time was right. The crowd was quiet now. Even the children had stopped their restless movements. In the distance, dust clouds marked the approach of riders. The territorial investigators, arriving exactly when Dr. Winters had promised. Blackwood saw them too. His hand moved toward his gun but stopped when he realized how many people were watching, how many witnesses there would be. This isn't over, he said quietly. Yes, it is, Sage replied. It's been over since the moment you killed my husband. The investigators rode into town with the authority of territorial law behind them. They carried proper warrants, proper documentation, proper procedures that couldn't be bought or intimidated. Justice, when it finally came, was quiet and thorough. Blackwood and Grimm were taken into custody. The forged land grants were invalidated. The Apache family's original claims were restored. Dr. Winters was commended for her courage. Zeke was offered a position as territorial marshal. And Sage returned to the land that had always belonged to her people, riding Whisper across ground that had been watered with too much blood, but was finally, truly theirs again. The stallion grazed peacefully in the evening light, his work complete, his burden of secrets finally lifted, his promise to a dying man fulfilled. In the distance, smoke rose from the cooking fires of families who could finally come home. And that is all to the story, for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you, it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.